When we think of legendary warriors, our minds usually wander to far-off jungles or deserts. But centuries before China raised its great walls, those lands were already home to clans as fierce as any other. It was a mosaic of hundreds of peoples, each with its own language, rituals, and leaders. In the east, the Tai Hao tribe thrived, masters of the tides and keepers of myths. To the north and west roamed the Rong and Di, herders who sharpened their arrows in icy valleys. Further north rose the ancestors of the Xiongnu and Xianbei, tireless archers who would turn the steppes into moving fortresses. Still, the clan that changed the fate of the plains bore a bear on its banner, the people of Huangdi. Born in the Julu Mountains, these nomads herded flocks and gathered roots, but dreamed of the fertile lands beyond the rivers. With each passing season, their tents moved deeper into the valleys until the horizon revealed fields full of wheat. There, they traded furs for rough hoes, but never let go of their hunger for conquest. Tribe names changed every time a leader fell, as if history was rewritten with each funeral. Under Huangdi's leadership, though, their deeds earned songs of their own. The clan defeated the Yan tribe and drove the 9 Chuli communities beyond the hills, making room for new villages and building a reputation as soldiers who could run for days without losing breath. Ballads told of healers reading omens in flames and blacksmiths forging blades that drank the twilight, while rivals whispered about who would fall next before the bear banner. Drums reminded everyone that the unification of rivers and valleys was only just beginning. Almost 5 millennia ago, the banks of the Yangtze River were home to peoples who would shape East Asia. In the humid valleys, the Hemudu and Magyabong refined rice cultivation, taming floods and turning swamps into productive farmland. From these efforts, the Liangzhu culture was born, blending advanced farming techniques with jade ceremonies, renewing the Longshan legacy. Around the 9th century BC, northern tribes like the Guwu and Yue made their way down to the southern swamps, bringing fresh energy. They soon mastered ideograms, understood the game of alliances, and sharpened the art of war. Their slender boats, carved from lightweight wood, cut through the misty canals, carrying warriors who maneuvered in flexible formations against larger armies. Precision metalwork backed this boldness. Balanced bronze blades and durable tools sped up harvests and strengthened their troops. Songs sung at festivals told of sieges against the state of Chu, and the rise of leaders who, once outsiders, became key figures in local politics. The rivalry between Wu and Yue, which burned for 3 decades, became a classic case of strategic calculation. After repeated campaigns, the king of Yue, Gu Jian, conquered Wu and redrew the borders, and the chronicles promised to reveal the next chapters of this epic struggle. When Qin Shi Huangdi built his empire in the 3rd century BC, he pushed Qin's borders all the way to the plains of Guangdong. Wu and especially Yue were pulled into the new center of power. Standardized roads cut through forests, districts were established, and local chiefs swapped tribal insignias for seals from Xianyang. Weights, measures, and characters began to speak the language of the north, even in places where the Great Wall was just a distant rumor. Under the Han, the map shifted again. The former Yue domain split into Nanyue, facing south, and Minyue hugging the coast. Zhao Tuo, a frontier general, crowned himself king of Nanyue, minted coins, and sought tropical alliances. It didn't last. Han columns marched in steady formation, toppling the short-lived throne and reminding everyone that the Central Plain imposed culture as firmly as it demanded taxes. Even so, it was the plow more than the sword that tied the South to the empire. Settlers from the Yellow River Valley came down in waves, drawn by long summers and land that yielded 2 harvests a year. They took over fertile valleys, and the Yue retreated to rocky hillsides. With the rhythm of the monsoons, women bent over flooded rice paddies, men carved terraces into the slopes, and farming habits began to mirror one another. Dialects blended, rituals traded drums, and Han surnames multiplied in the records, leaving an open question about what kinds of changes would come next. Have you ever noticed how some peoples manage to carry their history through the centuries without losing the thread? Among the Tai Kadai, communities like the Shan, Muang, Dai, and Zhuang have held steady on that path. Even under the weight of empires, they kept their language, rituals, and celebrations alive. And when the pressure became too much, they moved into Mon lands, carrying with them myths, songs, and the memory of their ancestors. That deep connection to ancient symbols echoes in another well-known setting, the Shaolin Monastery. There, monks turned the body into an extension of the mind. The temple began as a place for contemplation, but soon had to deal with invaders and wild animals. To handle that, they adopted exercises created by Bodhidharma, a hermit from India who taught that sweating could enlighten the spirit. Training got so serious that breaking boards became part of active meditation, a way to carve into the muscles the same calm they searched for on the zazen cushion. Over time, caravans spread stories of this discipline until they reached movie screens. Asian filmmakers saw the perfect story in Shaolin, warriors who fight not for conquest but for harmony. Audiences loved it. Stars like Jackie Chan brought the legend to life, and Kung Fu started to go hand in hand with philosophy. But behind the flashy moves that pack theaters, the same simple logic from the early days still beats. Every punch is a conversation with yourself. Every stance is a prayer in motion. Want to see how that tradition echoes today? Stick with us. Under constant attack, the Shaolin monks realized that hand skills alone weren't enough to protect the monastery. Staffs became part of their daily training. Spears, an extension of their devotion, were raised against invaders trying to loot sacred artifacts. With each assault, their technique grew sharper, shaping precise strikes, footwork that confused enemies, and an unshakable belief. Defending that ground was just as important as meditation. In this way, contemplative monks became sentinels, whose reputation spread through the valleys, building the legendary aura that lasted through the centuries. Far from the sound of temple bells, another story was unfolding. Between cultivated fields and windswept steppes, a mosaic of tribes lived in the stretch from Hami in the west to Xing'an in the east. Chroniclers called them Rong or Hu. Travelers preferred the name Mysterious Hill Dwellers. Russian researchers see them as ancestors of the Tangut clans, who would later control key trade routes from the upper Yellow River to the Sichuan valleys. Most intriguing of all, during the day decision-making belonged to the women, while men followed their lead, a custom that only changed with Sinicization. If Shaolin spears forged legends, the traces of these frontier peoples still whisper questions waiting to be uncovered. The Rong, labeled barbarians by Chinese scribes, hold a curious place in the tapestry of ancient Asia. From their marches through the northern valleys sprang bloodlines that would later give rise to the Tangut, Mongol clans, and the feared Xiongnu. Bamboo chronicles depict these people with Eurasian features, a mark of generations of encounters along imperial routes. Centuries later, the Tangut would inherit not just the blood, but also the spiritual legacy of the Rong. In their encounters with Tibetan nomads, they brought Chan philosophy into the tents, shaping a discipline that turned patrols into something like horseback monasteries. Between the 11th and 12th centuries, this cultural melting pot gave rise to Xixia, a state strong enough to face China without bowing. On the plains, Tangut warriors trained to ignore arrows like others ignore the wind. That toughness gave strength to the new kingdom, which rose from the ruins of others to control routes of silk, salt, and iron. But the same walls that protect can also isolate. Easy victories led to wealthy courts, cushy bureaucracies, and soldiers dulled by routine. Without conflict to keep blades sharp, the old boldness turned into ceremony. When the 13th century dawned, the steppes rumbled once more. Genghis Khan united scattered tribes under a single banner and surged forward like a storm over Xixia. The walls fell, the halls went silent, and the Tangut dynasty vanished from the records. Even now, the echo of those horses still lingers, setting the stage for the next great turn in this saga. To understand how China was forged in fire and iron, you just have to go back to the Shang state, from 1766 to 1122 BC. Kings called Wangs, starting with Wu Wang, traded land and titles for loyalty, strengthening alliances, and unintentionally corruption too. Young men trained for years for war. Women kept the household and supplies running. The machine seemed unstoppable until internal disputes and tribal clashes broke its core. Without unity, the land turned into a patchwork of fiefdoms, and the chronicles speak of entire fields covered in bodies after battles. But the race for supremacy was only in its first act. Jump ahead 2 centuries to 260 BC, when a gruesome scene burned itself into collective memory. Qin forces captured around 400,000 Zhao soldiers at Changping and buried them alive. The Qin army combined the rage of fresh recruits on the front line with a belt of seasoned veterans behind them, absorbing blows and launching counterattacks. A strategy that turned fear into a psychological weapon. When victory seemed out of reach, this mix of aggression, discipline, and terror flipped the outcome in a matter of hours without warning. But the biggest threat came from the north. Since the 5th century BC, reports describe the Xiongnu, nomadic horsemen who appeared, raided, and vanished just as fast. To hold them back, fortresses were built and eventually linked together, forming the backbone of the Great Wall. By the 3rd century BC, under a determined Shan Yu, they united a sweep of territory stretching from Mongolia to Siberia, and east to west from Manchuria to the Pamirs. Riding lightweight horses, 300,000 archers could surround Chinese chariots, strike from the flanks, and disappear over the horizon, keeping generals constantly on edge and fueling a cycle of conflict that would shape the dynasties to come. Not even the massive Great Wall could fully stop the horsemen that came from the steppes. When the alarm drums echoed, the Han court realized that stone wasn't enough. It sealed pacts, paid tributes, and used political marriages to buy time. Even with agreements, each truce was short-lived. One season was all it took for new raids, exposing the fact that living borders need more than bricks. The wall worked more like a watchtower than a solid barrier, and generals dreaded seeing, the next winter, the nomads' campfires glowing behind the battlements. In 50 BC, the Xiongnu Empire split. One faction accepted Chinese oversight, the other rode west. 43 years later, in 93 AD, Han troops and Xianbei archers fought side by side at the Battle of Yi Bai, breaking nomadic pride. The final blow came in 155 AD, when the Xianbei commander Tian Shihai scattered the survivors. Some merged with the Xianbei, others stayed in China. A group reached the shores of the Black Sea, and the last settled between the Volga and Don, distant roots of the future European Huns. Jump to the green-gray slopes that roll down to Lake Lugu, at the foot of the Himalayas, and you'll find the Mosuo people, sometimes called the Kingdom of Women. They say an ancient bloodline runs through their veins, but what really stands out is their social structure. In this community, the matriarch is in charge. Land, livestock, and homes are passed from mother to daughter, while men move through as guests. The central custom is Zohun, the walking marriage. Starting at 13, a young woman can quietly receive a nighttime partner. To avoid confusion, he hangs his hat on the door. Before sunrise, he leaves without a fuss. Women plant corn and take cloth to the Yongning market. Men care for the yaks and play with the kids. The maternal line is the backbone. Each baby strengthens the female clan, and the biological father, though present, never takes the lead. The wheel keeps turning, just like the caravans that once crossed these mountains. Over the course of 100 years, several projects tried to merge the Mosuo into the Chinese cultural mainstream, but the mountain range surrounding Lake Lugu acted as a natural barrier. Until recently, it took a week on foot to reach the nearest city. That bottleneck helped preserve a unique social structure. Once the roads arrived, the government began to see difference as a product. In Luoxui, Mosuo heritage was turned into stages, costumes, and ticketed shows, a polished display for tour groups. But just a few kilometers uphill, it's a different picture. In the highland villages, maternal rituals remain intact, and clan decisions are still made around the communal hearth. In a country that values uniformity, these pockets of autonomy are a reminder that diversity doesn't threaten unity, it fuels creative resilience. Inviting you to reflect on that contrast brings our journey to a close, reinforcing the thread that's run through this whole series. Traditions can stand the test of time, so long as we see them before they turn into just folklore.